Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session on engineering entrepreneurship. Let me put the perspective right in the beginning and by just recapping what exactly we have done before. So, just to present the summary of the work that we have already gone through, we have already looked into the characteristics of the entrepreneurships. What are the challenges and how entrepreneurs approach those challenges differently when compared to the managers? So we have seen in detail the effectual thinking and the causal thinking. We have compared them, and through examples, we have explored how entrepreneurs applied effectual thinking to solve the problems at hand. In the last session, we covered the issues related to the early startups their failure analysis. We applied the pain and gain theory, and we discussed the Apple example, how Apple is different from the rest of the companies. We have understood the importance and the logic behind studying the analogs and the antilogs, and then holding some leaps of faith and testing those leaps of faith through a rigorous set of experiments and building up our dashboard. And in this session, what we are going to do is we are going to continue what we did last time. By the way, another thing that we did last time was the framework. We looked into the both into the process as well as into the framework. The elements of the process, they were antilogs, analogs, leaps of faith, and dashboarding. Whereas the elements of the framework, they included a revenue model, a gross margin model, an operating cost model, a working capital model, and an investment model. And we have also discussed that how those companies who went into the bin, they could not succeed as startup did not convert, they did not successfully able to convert them into the companies. They lack either the process or the framework. And then we had taken the examples of Google, Starbucks, and the Body Shop. In this session, what we are going to do is we are going to continue what we were doing in our last session. But additionally, there will be a framework that how should you think as a young entrepreneur. If you have to start thinking that what you should be building, where that thinking is going to come from. So what we will do, we will create a framework that if you are going to put the leaps of faith, how these leaps of faith will work. But before that, let's see that what problem you are going to solve. When you are picking up a problem, by the way, in the following slides, I will be explaining that where these problems are going to come from. You need to have the problems qualified. Not all the problems that you pick up are worthy of being solved. Sometimes the young entrepreneurs, they put a lot of effort. They put a lot of effort in terms of building up a startup. And at the end, they realized that all their effort had gone waste because the problem was so trivial that there were not enough customers who were going to buy that particular product that they built. So when you are working in vacuum, you have the tendency and you are vulnerable. You can pick up any problem and start solving. So the first question that you need to address is that you have to see that you do not solve ordinary problems, minimal, mild problems. Sometimes you are uncomfortable and you do not take medicine if you are uncomfortable. Even if many a time you are suffering from small headache, you do not take medicine. So what problem you are going to pick up, the first criteria that the problem to be solved has to qualify is the severity. You need to ask yourself the question, is the problem that you are going to solve, is it migraine level problem? If the problem is somewhere over here, it may not require the solution, or if even if you provide the solution, people may not buy it. So what you need to do is you need to see that the problem that you are picking up lies on this scale of the pain scale spectrum. So we need to pick up migraine level problem. The next qualification step is, even if you have succeeded in picking up a migraine level problem, and not many people have that problem, only a few people have problem, so can you build a company to produce a product that will solve the problem of the few? That is another question. So that is called the spread question or the scale question. The severity question, you need to pick up a severe problem. And the scale question, you need to ask yourself, is the problem widespread? Is it as widespread as coronavirus? If the problem is limited to a few, despite the fact that it is lying on this side of the severity scale, you will not have enough customers. So 2 steps you need to pass through any idea that you bring to solve any problem. The problem that you have picked up, it needs to be severe. How much? How severe? It should be a migraine level problem. And it should not be limited to very few people. It needs to be widely spread problem. So once you have qualified these 2 steps, you are ready for the solution steps. We call them the problem step. Problem step number 1, problem step number 2. Problem step number 1 is look for the severity. If the problem is too severe, if it is intense and severe and unmanageable, then you have a chance. Your product, if it solves a problem that has severity on this side, that has more chances that you will buy. The people will, you can have a compelling value proposition and you can sell it. The second qualification step is, even if the problem that you found is very severe, intense, or unmanageable, but there are not enough customers, the problem is not widespread, only a few people, they have that problem, even then you need to drop that problem. You do not, or you should not go ahead from this point. So once a problem has qualified, or a given problem has qualified these 2 steps, you are ready for the solution steps. So what lies ahead? What lies in the solution steps? If you are asked a question that you have identified a problem that is migraine level, and the problem is as widespread as coronavirus, it's a pandemic, it's widely spread problem, should you start building the product? This is the next question. That is the question that we must answer before we start building anything, before committing even zero resource. You should not skip these steps. These steps are critical. So once you have picked up the problem, you need to ask yourself a few more questions. Where will these questions come from? That will be revealed in the next slide. You need to ask yourself, how is the problem being solved currently? If you can recall back to our last session, when we talked about the analogs and antilogs, those analogs and antilogs shall provide you this information, because the analogs are the one who are solving the problem successfully, or who have solved the problem successfully in the past, whereas the antilogs are the one, the individuals or the companies or the corporations who tried to solve that problem but they failed to solve. So this is the first step. So how is the problem being solved currently? And then the second question is, who are the ones solving the problem currently? How the problem is being solved, and who are the solvers? Who are the ones holding the solution? successful and unsuccessful. So from here, you will fetch the analogs and antilogs. And once you are studying the analogs and antilogs, you will be able to find what are the problems with the existing solutions. So picking up the problem to solve, that problem may have some prior solvers. Others are already solving it. If others are already solving it, then where is your room? So as an entrepreneur, as a young flexible mind, what you need to think? You need to think that there could be some problems with the existing solutions, means the problem is not being addressed so well. If the problem is not being addressed so well, it means that the existing solutions, they have problems. So now you are looking for the problems with the existing solutions. Can you solve the problem with the existing solutions? Because your analogs and antilogs who are trying to solve this problem with their existing set of expertise, knowledge, and information, but somehow there are issues with their solutions. Can you address those issues with your solution? Do you have can you solve the problem with the existing solution? If yes, do people know that you can solve those problems? This is the next thing. If you can recall, one of the key characteristic of the entrepreneur, the common denominator is that they build partnerships. They have suppliers, they have customers, they have other solvers, they have people with whom they can build strategic partnerships. Do people know that you can solve the problem? If they know that you can solve the problem, will they buy solution from you? If you have found somehow that they are going to buy the solution for you, from you, can you produce the solution? Now you see, this is, let's see the next question as well. So if you can produce the solution, how much shall it cost? By the way, we haven't talked about building up the solution. The last slide where we were talking about the problem qualification steps. The problem needs to be identified. Not all the problems are to be solved. Once a problem has qualified the severity and scale rubric, then you come to the solution steps. And the solution, it also asks so many questions. By this time, not even a single source has or resource has been committed. Nothing has been built. There's no point building something that nobody wants. So you have gone through, right, all these questions. And then at this stage, you come up with the right numbers. You come up with an idea that what sort of your minimum viable product can be and what will it cost you if you are going to produce it. Then comes another issue that, well, we have listed a framework here. How can we think actually? For thinking, but if you are going to ask all these questions, there is another framework. This is very famous framework. We know that a few W's and how. So what we need to ask, we need to ask all these questions. When you picked up a problem, that problem has qualified to be solved, you need to pass that problem through this mechanism or through this framework. When did the problem begin? Where did it begin? This, when you see that if you can answer all these questions, you can see the problem in the true perspective. Many a time we do not see the bigger picture. If you miss the bigger picture, you just see a piece and you try and produce that piece. When you try and bring that piece to complete the picture, as you had lost the perspective, you could not complete the picture. The solution is not complete. It's either incomplete or another failure you have produced. You become another anti-log. When did the problem begin? Where did it begin? Then who was the first one to notice it? How this problem got noticed? This will actually clarify all the pains or the gains associated with the problem. It will also give you an idea about the severity and scale of the problem. When we talk about the problem qualification, we talked about the severity and scale. Now, how will you know that the problem is, how severe is the problem, or what is the scale, or the how much widespread is the problem? Most of these questions, they will be answered by this framework. Who was the first one to notice it? What are the several possible causes of it? Many a time we are looking at a problem which is actually not the basic problem. The root cause lies somewhere else. So what are the several possible causes for it? Because many a time we are, if you are going to exterminate or eliminate a tree, you are just cutting the leaves. Cutting the leaves shall not address the problem. You have to go by the roots. So you can do the root cause analysis here. What are the several possible causes? If you can address the cause, that problem may get eliminated. So if you have a competitor who are trying to build a solution to manage this problem, whereas knowingly that the problem at hand is not the root cause, it itself is a product of another problem, and you go back and address the root cause, you eliminate that problem, and your competitor is simply outwitted. What is the impact of the problem of this scale? Who is affected? What other possible negative consequences could it have? The problem is being looked at in a certain perspective, but it can cause another negative or positive consequences. So you can take a market lead when your competitors, they are trying to manage the existing consequences of the prevalent problem, whereas you can anticipate, you can go into the future and see that what lies ahead. If you can see what lies ahead, you can start building something that will solve the problem which your competitors cannot see at the moment. Is the problem part of a bigger problem? Yes. How the problem is associated with other problems. There is a hierarchy of problems and solutions. Many a times, the solutions, they generate new problems. Let me give you an example on how the solutions produce problems. If you simply go 50, 60 years back, say 70 years back, you are in 1950s. Imagine the global climate or even our local climate. That was an excellent air to breathe in, and most of the people, they were drinking the water that was directly drawn from the ground, and there were less problems with, you know, the quality of the air and the quality of the water, which our forefathers, our early generations, they were having in 1950s or even before that. That was excellent as compared to the general access of water and air that we have today. What has happened over the years? Now, what they were doing, they were, most of them, they were traveling on horses and carts. They were traveling on horses and carts, but they had an excellent access to quality air and quality water. The communication was slow. It was sluggish. It could have taken days to travel from one city to another city. But what we have done, the later generation of engineers, they have solved the problem of communication. Especially, this is especially true in the developing economies. They have solved the communication problem. They have now the horse and cart, they have been replaced by the buses and the cars. You hardly see a cart and a horse in a city. There are a lot of buses and cars and other, and the motorcycles and so many other faster and quicker means of transport. The distance that our forefathers, they used to travel in days, we can travel the same distance in hours now. So the communication has gone faster. But what has happened? How about the quality of air? How about the quality of water? You cannot drink the water that is drawn directly from the ground. No one was buying the distilled, no one was buying the clean water for drinking 70 years ago, but now, as a result of the solution of the communication problem, we have solved the communication problem, and we are, even to a lesser extent, we have solved the transportation problem, and we have created health problem. Just look at the numbers. The numbers are so huge. How many people are dying because of drinking the poor quality water? How many people are dying or they are developing disease with their lungs and the respiration system because of the poor quality air? That you will be simply amazed. You will be worried about the numbers. So what has happened? The solution of the transportation problem has generated a bigger problem. This is where the sustainability comes in. If, as Einstein said, every time science solves a problem, it generates many. Now, the problem is, if the solution of every problem will produce another problem, how can we stay sustainable then? Then there is a trick. If the solution of an existing problem generates another problem that is lesser in severity and spread, that solution is sustainable. But if the solution has generated a bigger problem, as we have seen in this example, the solution of the transportation problem has generated a bigger problem, the health problem or the life problem. The life is at risk if you are drinking unhygienic water, you are drinking dirty water, or if you are breathing in air which is not fit for breathing, you will develop disease which will ultimately cause death. So in this case, the solution of the problem has generated a problem which is bigger in scale and severity. So that solution is not sustainable. That is why we are now heading towards the electric vehicles and the hybrid vehicles. The environment or the global environment or the climate change that has become so obvious. So if we see the 17 sustainable development goals, 9 out of 17 SDGs, the sustainable development goal, they relate to environment either actively or passively, directly or indirectly, in one way or the other way. So we have to see, is the problem part of a bigger problem? If so, how? How does this problem relate? How does this piece fit in the bigger game? Who has dealt with problems successfully? This is your analog. Then what are the possible several approaches to solving it? You need to find through the literature review by looking at the problem and then the solution, how they are solving the problem exists currently. What kind of time, expertise, and resources shall be needed for these solutions? Now, this is the question for you. Your analogs, they have certain expertise and resources which they are exploiting to produce the solution of the problem at hand. You need to know what type of or what kind of time and expertise you require. Will people buy into those solutions? Important question. How long will you reach to the solutions and the solution will be implemented? The time question is again very, very important. Sometimes we produce a product that is too early for the market, and sometimes we are just a few days off and someone else comes and they take the initiative is taken, the first mover's advantage. They have taken that. So this is again something, a very delicate balance between committing too many resources or avoiding the resource commitment of the resources and losing the first mover's advantage. So how might this solution give us the future advantage? So asking all these questions, when read with the whatever the discussion we had in last two slides, the severity and scale problem, and then the solution qualification steps, you will be able to reach to a conclusion where you can draw the basic canvas of your business model. A few questions, for more questions, but the primary questions, they have been addressed. So when you are looking for the problems, look through this lens. Then you are looking for the solutions. Again, you need to adopt this approach. And then what lessons can be learned from all of this? If you have gone through this exercise and your leaps of faith and your dashboard, that will help you get the solution, the lessons, if your leap of faith is proved or if it is refuted. In all cases, at the end, you manage to learn something. All right, when you are filling in the dashboard, how do you do this? So these are the 5 elements of the framework, if you know what we did last time. So we had the process elements. This is process, and this is framework. The process elements: analogs, antilogs, leaps of faith, and then the hypothesis that you are going to build. So overall, this will be a complete dashboard, and you are not comparing the product only. That is another problem which we usually fell victim to, that we address only one aspect of the product. It's not the one aspect. I've already given you an example on the iPod. The iPod was so, it was not so innovative on Apple's part in terms of developing the technology. It was actually their business model that helped them gain all the advantage that they had. So what we have to do, we need to see if you have selected a few analogs and antilogs, this table should be filled. So in revenue model, what exactly is the approach of your analogs? What were your antilogs doing? What leaps of faith around which you will build your current dashboard? What are these leaps of faith? You need to list those leaps of faith. I'll explain this through the Apple example again at the end of this session. Then what hypotheses you will hold in order to refute or prove your leaps of faith. So you need to test all of these elements of the framework. Revenue model, what revenue model your analogs had, what revenue models your antilogs had, what were the problems, and then now this is your turn. What questions that you will ask and how you are going to test all of those questions. This should be done for this revenue model, for the gross margin model, for the operating cost model, for the working capital model, and for the investment model. In our last session, I explained that what kind of questions these revenue model, the gross margin model, operating cost model, and working capital model, and investment model, what type of questions they are going to answer. If I can repeat a few of them, that the revenue model is going to answer that who will buy, how often they will buy, how soon they will buy, at what cost they will buy, how much money will you receive each time you get a payment, and how often they will send you another money order check. These are all the questions that will be offered by the revenue model. Then the gross margin model will answer the question that how much of your revenues shall be left after you had paid the direct cost of what you have sold. Anything that you are selling, how much you put in to produce that for the direct cost. Then the operating cost model, this will help us getting to know that other than the cost of goods and services that you have sold, what else must you spend money on to support the sale? So not in terms of producing the good. When you are producing something, some of the cost, that is a direct cost. For example, if you are producing a cup or a bottle, you have an injection molding machine, you need plastic or the raw material, the energy, the human resource that is required to produce that. These are all direct costs. But at the back end, you need to know that what are the other costs, indirect costs, which you have to bear as a company. Then the working capital model, it will answer the question, some questions like how early can you encourage your customer to pay? And then can you pay your suppliers later, and you can have your customer paid you early? All these questions, they should be answered. So what you should be doing, if you know the framework, you know the framework elements, you need to study your analogs and antilogs so well that having studied them, this shall help you to build the leaps of faith. If you are not very much familiar with your analogs and antilogs, you may not be able to establish a great leaps of faith. Hence, the utilization of the dashboard, it will not be to it will not be optimized in that sense. So what's happening here? So let's take an example of these analogs and antilogs. If you can see the product over here is this. This is Apple's iPod. Now, Apple, they had been in the computer business since 1977. So what Apple is famous for, ask anyone who was born after 1990s, their answer would be iPhone, iPod. That is going to be the answer. The iPod was so revolutionizing for Apple that half of Apple's revenue in 2006 that came from the sale of the iPods, which they had just developed a few years ago. Apple, they used to be a PC manufacturers. They were a very innovative company, but a struggling company. They built the world's first PC with keyboard. They were innovative. Their designs were innovative and intuitive. Now, the iPod, it was not born from the Apple's DNA. What Apple has done in producing the iPod, what Steve Jobs was looking around, he was sensing a flurry and activity in the music industry around 2000 in the US. They were sensing that the appetite for digital music was increasing. How the problem of digital music had been solved prior to Apple's iPod. So this was the Sony's Walkman. Since 1977, Sony was the sole leader in the digital music. When they produced this Sony's Walkman, they sold 330 millions of Walkman in first 5 years. So Sony was a strong analog for Apple. So with this analog, they started that there are customers, there are people who will buy the digital music device. Now, what they were looking for, where they were looking for the antilogs. The antilogs were not very far. Napster. Napster was a peer-to-peer music sharing website. 26 million users worldwide, but it was illegal. Internet downloads of the music were more attractive than going to a recording shop. So people were getting used to that. If they can download the music, they don't have to go for the recording shop. So now the problem was, shall people pay? That was a different question. And the subscription-based model, this was again MusicNet. This was a subscription-based model, but there was a problem. So this was another solution. But the problem was no downloading to the portable devices. They were not taking care of this. So Napster was one thing. It had problems, illegal music. MusicNet was another solution. There was a problem, no downloading to the portable devices. Then Press Play. Press Play was another company. At the same time, when Apple was about to build the iPod, they were also doing, but they did allow a small number of songs to be written on CD. It was a strong antilog, and then there was Diamond Media's MP3 player Rio. Rio, it was another platform. It was another device that could be used, but it had also some problems. The problem, it has very bad user interface. It was slow transferring of music between the PCs and Rio, and no market for the complicated digital music player. It was a complicated music digital player. Now, what Apple was thinking, they started with an analog. They listed all the current solutions, and all of the solutions, they had problems. So they became Apple's Antilogs. So how did they manage? What questions Apple actually asked? So the first question they were asking, was there a different business model that would work? So the value which they were offering, or what they were about to offer, they were asking this question, that was there a different business model? They know the business model that all of their analogs and antilogs they were following. And when they had done this analysis, even Sony's Walkman became their antilog. Antilog not in terms of digital music, antilog in terms of the business model. So the question was there a different business model that would work? And then the next question, now these are the leaps of faith. Would there be consumer acceptance of a site that offered a huge selection of music for small fee? These were the two questions that Apple had as their leaps of faith. The answer came that the music lovers, they shall pay, or they would pay for their tunes. Then come the other question. What if the Apple offered both the hardware and the software? So this was another question that Apple had asked as their potential leaps of faith. What they were looking for, they were looking for an MP3 or and then a few tunes that will be played in that device. Would the record companies come along? Well, the question was, where would the music come from? If the Apple offered both hardware and software and MP3 and tunes to play, attract the record companies, would the record companies come along? This is another manifestation of building up the strategic partnership. The answer was yes, they will come along. When Apple built it, what they did, they were building a product for whom they had not built the technology by themselves. The technology was built by another company. And the idea was not their own. Idea was from the Sony's digital music. What revolutionized iPod was the business model. In October 2001, the iPod was launched. 143 million into the revenue in year one. All other companies, they were selling the razors. The razor, sorry, the handle. Steve Jobs wanted to sell both the handle as well as the razor. Razor was selling, Steve wanted to sell the blade as well. Recording industry, they were on board. In April 2003, iTunes Store was born. Now come the blades. 99 cents per song and 1 million songs were downloaded on the first day of the launch. 6 months into the down the line, there were 7.5 million song or iTunes that were sold. So what we can learn from this, that it's not only the technology, it is actually technology, the adaptation or adaptability of the entrepreneurs plus the business model that you deploy. So it is not this iPod as a technology itself, rather it is a business model that Apple had chosen to revolutionize the digital music world. So when we are looking at any product where we are going to pitch our solution, we need not only to focus on the technical aspects, we need to think in a holistic way. When I say the bigger picture perspective, a helicopter approach, you need to rise above and then see how that particular problem is fitted into the hierarchy of the problems and solutions. So kindly go through all this material, and we will be doing some exercises in the class related to how can we think creative. Thank you so very much.